Can you hear me, by the way?
Yep. I can hear you.
Cool. I expect very few people on the call because I think Alex is on holiday, right?
Yeah, Alex stuff.
And I think Severin is also not going to be joining. So I think it will be the three of us. All right. So maybe let's start with the agenda. I'll share my screen in 1 second. You see the screen? I didn't update it yet. So the good thing is 1.0.1 is released. 0.1.0 is released, right?
I mean, let me see.
Actually, we see your browser with
I
the.
didn't. Yeah.
Oh no, we see the picture warning.
99% this is the issue.
I did the wrong
See
one.
the
Right.
yeah, that's fine.
Share screen. Share screen. Yeah, I think I shared the wrong one. Yeah. Better?
Yeah.
So the good thing is that 0.1.0 is released, right? So that's fantastic. Thanks for all the work that people have done. So maybe I should jump quickly to the board, right? Because we had some discussion on the board and I actually changed something. SDC. SDC. So I think, why is it so slow? It's really slow. I'll wait. Why is it so slow?
It's loading for me, so I guess it's
So yeah, I don't know.
on your
Also,
side.
have a nice word or
Yeah, it's my side. Yeah, it's my side. That's great. So I created a new view on the board. And the discussion is, so I now call them, so we still have milestone-based board, but we can, so I created a board which has a release date. It doesn't really go where I want it to go, and now it's fast. Here, I created this view. So, interesting. I thought I created a board with a release date. Maybe I didn't save it or something like that. View. Release. Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to show. Yeah, so, and I don't know whether this is, whether the names are good, right? But so now you can have a board based on a release name. Is that better than the milestone thingy? So the idea is you can actually, yeah, so basically this is release, so this should all be done, right? And then I think one of the thoughts was, okay, let's plan the next release. And we just add the items that we want or that we believe needs to be in there. Let's add them. We can also discuss the name. I just call it 011 for now, but we can also discuss other names, right? So it doesn't have to be a version. So it can be blah or something like that. And then we can make them, I can decide on the number afterwards. So these were all the things that I was thinking about when doing this. But yeah. So I don't know what people view on that side. The nice thing is, so the bad thing with milestones is that although it's not really mandatory, but I didn't find a way to create them without a date. So the problem is that you have to put a date inside, and at the moment, because we have all this undeterministic circumstances, that our date is sometimes floating, but the content stays the same. So from that point of view, maybe it's better just to create like the next item, and we can call it. I mean, if you call it another name than the target release name, the problem is that for backward compatibility, you need to build an association somewhere, I think, right? So you need to somehow know that foo is that version. Because I think all the items, so the reason, so how you get an item here, you need to give it the release label. So the way, if you click on this, I think here on the right-hand side, so you can tag it a release or something, but also if you drag this thing inside, it will get automatically a release label. So the problem is that if you then later on, let's say if the release was done and call it foo, right? So not the version, you need to somehow know that foo was fee, blah, blah, blah. But I feel it's easier to manage. That's my perception, but I don't know. I mean, I just wanted to show this, but also use this as a way to discuss the next content, because then we have captured it in the board.
Yeah, I think it's a nice way to discuss. How did you activate that on the view thing?
Yeah, so I don't know why it didn't stuck. So the board has several views, right? So basically what the board is basically a representation of the issues that you have in Git. And so this is kind of all the issues that are in the various repositories. You can kind of add them to this project board. And then these views are ways to represent the data. Right?
Yeah, that makes. I'm also on the release board, but I don't get this view by release. How do you?
What I did here is, so you go to swim lanes and you add release. But it should be, I think, save view is what I didn't do. So if I save it now, it will be there for you as well. It should be there, I think, for everyone. That's what I forgot to do.
Yeah, nice.
And so what you should do is that if we believe there are topics that needs to be added, I think by just dragging them here, you get the tag is what I saw. So the problem is, of course, if you don't call them this name, right? So the problem is that sometimes we don't know the name, right? So because we called the previous one v01.1, I called the next one v1.1, but that's also, we have to decide upon that somehow, based on the content.
Because you cannot just edit it now, and it's going to edit all of them, or?
Yeah, I don't know whether no, I don't think so, because it's a label, right? And so you have to update all of them.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time it's clear what the next version is, and otherwise we can just click on archive and create a new one and pull them all in the new one. I mean,
Yeah, correct. So yeah, so that's the thing that I think we probably have to experiment with a little bit to see how bad it is or how easy or how whether we need to improve. But yeah, I feel it's a better way to manage them because you're not tied to a date necessarily. The only thing that I've been disputing with myself is do we call it the version or do we call it something full, right? So like something opaque. And because then you can always decide. So the advantage of it is that the name of the release, like the version, the semantic version that we tag to it, can be decided later or at the end. And because right now, by calling it v01.1, you kind of say it's kind of minor changes. So that's the.
what if we add a date type versioning there that we can say when we want to do this release? Or
That's what milestones were, and then there was some pushback that they were not so nice, right? But we could so milestones are a way to do that with a date. So milestone is typically a name with a date. But maybe the way that we were managing them was not good. The problem also with milestones, what I've reckoned, is that you need to tie them to all the projects. Whereas with this label, I didn't have to do that. So in other words, to create a milestone, I mean, I have a script, right? So that's not a problem. The challenge that I have with a date is that so far we have never been successful with the dates. So that's the only, let's say, caveat that I wanted to, or that I saw from the past. But I preferred in the beginning. I prefer this milestone thingy. The only problem is that how we used it is we had it per week. So the challenge is that we had to move these issues around all the time, and that's also not good, right? So, but yeah. So we have these two mechanisms. Maybe we should try and see what works or doesn't work, and then we can adapt, right? But yeah, the only downside that I have is that here, by putting the minor thing there, it's already. We could also call it 2.0, 0.2.0 as well, if you want, right?
yeah, or we just then we just do it like a full, like you just take a version that it was before and you do a post.
Yeah, and then we tag it
continue.
afterwards.
And then you tag it afterwards when we release it.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see how easy the system is to manage all of that, right? But it would also be nice that you actually have a label associated at the end of the final result, right? For historical purposes. And maybe we need to have two labels for this, right? So but I was digging into the labels. Maybe there's another label that we can use besides release, where we manage like the internal version or the next internal version. We give it a name, and then and then we decide to release afterwards or something like that. Yeah, I'll need to dig into how to do that. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, but so what I think is important right now is to discuss the content, right? What do we want to get in there? And our view right now has been to work on this. That was my view. On adding or ensuring that we have back support and that our integration tests work again with all the functionality that we had before. And so the thing that is still missing is clear deviations. So that's the thing that we are right now trying to get added. So that's why these two items are here. Yeah, so that's kind of what we have at the moment. So the goal is to add this ability to have to clear the deviations in a non-reverted mode and have the ability to do that. And by doing so, the goal is to get our integration tests back up and running and to get them to 100% running state. So that's basically, I don't know whether anyone has a different perspective, but that's kind of what, together with Marcus, we are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense to get them up running before adding new features.
Okay, let's take one.
Yeah. Now there is a major challenge is, like we discussed. So there is two things that we probably need to discuss. Is like I'm trying to figure out whether we can use sub resources for this, right? Rather than creating an additional instance. And I feel that if we succeed in doing so, at the moment, I'm not yet successful, but I think I have a way to do it. The problem is right now I need to finish something else first. I'm a bit stuck. I'm stuck because of other things that I have to do. Is that if we succeed, I also feel that we should move running config, show running config and config blame as sub resources, not as individual instances. And the reason for that, for me, is that at the moment, the way they operate is actually we don't store anything with show running config or config blame. They are just a means to actually proxy what is in the data server to the Kubernetes API, via the Kubernetes API, so that we can consume it in kubectl. But there is actually not really a storage system behind. It's actually I see those sub resources as verbs or kind of subverbs that you kind of attach to a resource. So the idea is then that there would be a sub resource called clear deviations, and there would be a sub resource called show running config, and there would be a sub resource config blame, or we could just call it running config without the show, right? And then as such, we just perform the operation as part of the target, which is what they are today.
And I just quickly come back to the project board.
Sure.
Because I was poking around, and basically what we have there, if you go back to the board film, so we can have an.
I am on the
Oh
board.
yeah, no, you're there. Can you refresh it? Because what I did, the two things, the two items under. Yeah, now it's so the two items you have here: add deviation clear and add ability to move deviations. Right? They're the same thing, correct?
Yes, yeah, they are just.
So what I did now, and that's why the purple progress bar shows up, is I've added the ability to remove deviations, which is defined on the config server as a sub issue of the add deviation clear, right? But both show up now still. So in my view, the config server one should not show up here because we want the as you call it, epic only to show up here and have the sub issues showing up here with their progress and so on, right?
Yeah, you can just remove them here, just delete it from the project and it's done, basically.
Okay.
That's how to do it if you want it. Yeah, so this is just historical. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is a bunch of, actually, maybe we should remove all of these from the list, right? Because I just imported them at some point from the list, right?
I mean,
Yeah, it's a way to do it.
I mean, we don't necessarily have epics for bugs or the likes,
Correct,
right?
yeah.
So it somehow makes sense to for certain things have the individual ones sitting here. But for those that are combined, like that are part of an epic, they shouldn't show up as individual items here, right?
No, correct. And we have we can manage it the way we want. But yeah, I think it was there for historical reasons. I just imported them at some point. Yeah.
Okay, right. That was it. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, coming back to clear deviation. Yeah. So what I was saying is that for the sub resources, yeah, if we succeed, then I'm also of the opinion that yeah, we should move those things that are not storing anything and are actually just actions on a target. We should actually use that mechanism. The advantage is that we have way more flexibility with respect to the content of that data because it's actually not stored. So we have I think we have ways to better represent certain elements from it, because right now, for example, show running config is just a JSON blob. So we could have way more expressive mechanism by which the client side can then use more intelligent mechanisms to do representations in various forms and what have you. So these are the advantages that we get from it. So now to proceed
with the disadvantage that it would not be accessible, to my understanding, would not be accessible via plain kubectl, right? As we have it today.
you have to build a plugin. You have to build a plugin.
I'm just saying, like, we should take a look at both sides of the middle, right? So we have pros and we have cons, and whatever this is now for to anyone, but that would be an implication that would come with it.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so if we do that with sub resources, because these are not standard sub resources of Kubernetes, kubectl by default doesn't support them, but you can make kubectl do them with a plugin. So, which means that that plugin would be important, or is becoming more important, or will become mandatory if we use SDC in such a way. That's a disadvantage. That's a good point. Yeah. But if you do clear deviations that way, that will be mandatory anyhow, right? If for those people who are using clear deviation, which might be more of an exception, which might not be mainstream for everybody, it might be only for the ones that are using non-revertive mode, right? Because for a revertive configuration, the clearing happens automatically, right?
How does it work with sub-resources? Because if I understood it correctly, like a sub-resource, for example, of a pod, the status is a sub-resource of the pod, and the spec is a sub-resource. So how would that work with the, like, it's not something different, it's a part, right? Isn't it? Is a sub-resource not a part of the main resource?
Yes. So in other words, a sub-resource is a sub-item of a main resource. So the idea is to attach them to a target. So you would have, what you do basically is you do the action on the target, right? So you basically say, like you do today, target dash dot status. So you get access to the status elements of the sub-resource, right? So what you would do is target dot clear deviation, and then you have access to the clear deviation on the target. And the same for, if you look at show running config, it's actually, if you look under the hood, what's happening today, when you do show running config, we do a list, right? So that list is actually, I look up the targets and I give the name of the targets back. If you do show running config minus O YAML or JSON, I actually go to the device, fetch for each of the targets, the running config, and then I represent it that way. So that's how it's executed. So when you do sub-resources, actually the operation that sits behind will not change. It's just the way it's represented to the user.
I mean, in the end, it's an addition to the HTTP path, right? And then you have other handlers that you register, but you would still then return resources, and the clear deviations would probably become a code, basically, right? I assume.
Yeah, so clear deviations would be, if you look to the URL, right, it would be, what is it, group version, and then it's tenant, because it's a tenant resource, tenant, targets, the name of the target, and then the sub-resource name. And in this case, it would be, because we have data, right? With a get, you cannot do data, so you have to put a put or a post.
Yeah, put a post.
And that's
and then post the document.
Yeah, and then you get
that contains whatever is required for the action.
Yeah, and then you get a response back, which is basically the metadata name of the target, right? And then the sub-resource information. So yeah. So Kubernetes supports this, by the way, but by default, they're only having first-class support as in the CRD ecosystem. So this is one of the reasons why the API server, why people deploy their own API servers, right? Is that a CRD only has 2 sub-resources. So Kubernetes allows extendability only with 2 sub-resources in its documentation, actually in the code. And one is status and the second is scale. But if you have a requirement like we are discussing here to extend them, the way that you can extend the Kubernetes system is using API server, which is what we are doing. I think if you go to, what is it, aggregated API server. It's one of the reasons they list as why you should build an API server. See, here there is like presentations, but they are, so it's pretty young. Okay. Yeah, there is, I'll wait till, but so the sub-resources is one of the reasons to build your own API server.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
All right, I think, so maybe, Fabian, so the first thing that I'm doing is actually, I'm almost there. But so the first thing that I did is I actually aligned the config server, because there is quite a few changes in 1.35 with the latest plugins, right? So I have a PR, but at the moment integration test fails, so I'm debugging that. So on the moment I succeed, my goal is to merge. I will try to get that to merge into main, because that would be the foundation on which we would do the sub resources. We need this anyhow, basically, but because there is quite a few changes in the API server itself, that I said, okay, there's no point in doing it from the past, but we should do it based on the latest information, right? If that makes sense, yeah. Oops, was that a question? Gurley is there, okay.
Hello.
Here, see, here, if you look at this, see, scale and other sub resources at operations other than CRUD, such as log exec, right? So that's kind of what they do. And then, it's not here. Do they call it out here?
So yeah, but in the end, if we do that, we would need to put more or higher priority on the kubectl SDC plugin, and also
Yes.
put that into the crew index, right? The plugin system, or the plugin index for Kubernetes and so on, that we get auto installation through using crew and so on, right? All these kind of things.
Yes. Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should do that. Yeah, but let's first see whether we succeed, right? And then we can see what we have to do from that perspective. But yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, but I mean, and to some extent, this might scare off that you're relying on any additional resources or so on, right? But yeah, I just wanted to point out that we will try to fit into the ecosystem as good as possible, and make the installation and stuff as easy as possible.
Yes. Is that a concern, Fabian, for you, or?
No, it's good. I was just it wasn't 100% clear to me what sub resources are used for, because I somehow as the deletion.
Yeah.
You broke up with your last sentence.
Just with the deletion, for me, it wasn't quite sure that this. I didn't understand how that this is a sub resource, but
yeah,
I think it's more problem on my side.
Yeah, so typically, for example, if you do a pod log, right, it's actually a sub resource. I don't know. I'm not sure whether it's implemented exactly like that, but that's one way to do it. So you could say, I log. For example, if you want to do logging on a target, we could do these things, right? So, for example, saying, okay, log everything for this specific device, all the operation of netconf. We could actually build a logger that just does that if we do this. Or any other action or thing that you can come up with, right? So that's the beauty of it, is that you have, and I think it's natural, right? So you have a resource, and then you have typically CRUD, right? So you do a get, a list, a delete, right, on that resource. But sometimes you need other, it's typically verbs, but it's not really correct, right? But typically you say, okay, I want to log something, or I want to do other actions that are not typical CRUD. That's kind of how you sometimes can think about that.
Yeah, makes sense now. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Use it like that. Thanks for explanation.
All right. So my goal of this week is to, so first I'm trying to get this lineup done. So if you have time to help with the review, that would be great. And then second is I'm trying to get an experiment with the sub resources at least that we know the semantics, right? And how it looks like before we go full steam in. So try to have a conclusion by the end of the week so that we can discuss next week. All right. And I think maybe Gurgly, do you have maybe first an update on the CNCF space? Or not yet?
Not yet. I will have a meeting with Daniel from CNCF today, discussing how can we modify the contributor agreement if we don't have a logo. So let's see how that goes.
Yeah. Okay.
I will keep you posted.
Yeah. Okay, so I think Marcus, we had some discussion on the clear deviation type of the house, right? On some of the APIs. Do you want to take that, or?
I can, yes. See my screen?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the clear deviation, wait. So the initial idea that we've had, I think I thought that way, was to come up with a separate API call for reverting the deviations. It's now been proposed that we do not come up with an additional API here, but rather pull this functionality also into the transaction set request, right? The one that we use to apply config intents or send config intents towards data server. The discussion we've had last week resulted in, the request on the gRPC interface between config server and data server is exactly this, right? So we have a transaction ID, data store name, dry run flag, timeout, and all the intents, and we also have the replace intent that would replace the whole content of the device if set. But then we have the different intents here as the transaction intent, which carry the intent name, its priority, the list of updates, if it's a delete, if it's an orphan, if it's non-revertive, if it was previously applied, which is something that we need for the non-revertives. When we reestablish the connection, then we don't want to push that to the device again. And then it's basically down here, the revert paths, right? So that would be the paths per intent that are meant to be reverted, so that we insert and put into the deviation revert kind of call. That's the actual proposed API change.
Yeah.
I am still little concerned that we put too much into this transaction set, right? With all the variants you might have with intents that can be deleted, dry runs. What else do we have? We have here the explicit deletes and all sorts of stuff. And now we're also adding the revert deviation functionality into it. So yeah, that's a bit my concern. Vim is specifically for this variant, right?
Yeah,
so
my motivation is the following. Is I'm looking at this from how GNMI as well as actually also netconf actually as well as HTTP operates. Right? If you separate them, that means that from a client point of view, you have to do things in sequence because every operation that we do on the data server is a lock. So it has to succeed before you do the next thing. And now, so this allows for sending a bunch of activities. Now, how the data server performs them, it can still do them in sequence. But at least from a client point of view, you have basically why HTTP2 invented multiplexing, right? Is because they had the ability to lock. So that before you could do one thing and then the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So now you can actually do things in bulk. And anyhow, we had this already in the past.
My argument here was more that it increases complexity of the API functions themselves, increases the test matrix, because you have to test. You would have to test all of these functionalities in combination and so on. And at the same time, at least to me, it's a separate function that is being executed from a user's perspective even. It's not like all the other stuff is based on configuration intents, whilst the revert paths is obviously, since we're now like either introducing the sub-resource or a new CRD. If the sub-resource doesn't work, or however we want to do it, it's even to the outside world. It's a different path to enter this functionality. And since that is the case, I'm strongly voting for separating it.
Yeah, but I think, so I think we have to basically, this is an internal API that's not necessarily exposing how the user consumes it, right?
But we've always, but at the same time, we've always said that we want to keep data server to some extent usable, or to the main extent usable, even without complex server, right?
With this API, you can still do so, but you don't have to.
It's just ending up in a mess of options. Yeah, it might.
I think if by splitting, we'll regret it. That's what I'm saying. We are going to regret the split.
Right. So Fabian, any comments, any input from your side?
Or the neutral judge.
Yeah, I don't think I'm qualified to give yeah, I'm missing a bit context, and but I think I need to check with when Alex is back. I can check with him, or
yeah, but we need to. Yeah, the problem is we need to make a decision somehow, because it will take 3 weeks, right? It's 3 weeks.
Yeah, he's still off next Monday, but I think then he's back. But
yeah,
I don't think I have the let's say.
Look
View
at it the following, right? So we have a transaction API, right? So just think of it high level. There is a transaction API towards the system to say, I want you to do this, right? So today in that API, what we have, let's say configs, which are basically updates and creates, basically. So it's updates, right? So basically saying to do stuff. We also have deletes. We also have dry run. So that was already there, right? What I'm basically saying is that clearing the deviation at that as part of the same set, right? Because if you as a user want to consume multiple things, so the argument of Marcus is the following, and I understand this is concern, right? But I am of the opinion that if you look to various usability patterns, you will regret separating it. And I'm looking at it from a perspective of how other protocols have evolved in the past towards what they are today, right? So in the past we had, so what Marcus is proposing is you do for every single thing that you want to do, you want to have a separate API. Just blunt, right? Now, the consequence of it is that by doing so and exposing it like that, we have a lock for every operation, right? So that means that you have now a hard sequence of how you can do things. So if you want to do operation A, you need to wait till it's finished, till you can do 2, till you can do 3, till you can do 4, from a client perspective, right? So you as a consumer of this API, you need to be doing things in sequence, right? What I'm basically proposing is no, just you have an API, and in there you have a set of operations, right, that you can do and you can send in one bulk, and whether you execute them in sequence so if you go back to the complexity in data server, you can argue whether if you don't want the complexity, he can still do it in sequence if he wants. But towards the client, you are no longer constrained to basically say 1, A, B, C, D. So you basically, what I'm basically saying is build the API in such a way that you can send all the things that you want to do in one go at the same time. And then it's up to, at some point it's done, you get a result, or you either fail and you succeed, and then you go from there. That's basically the difference in a nutshell.
Yeah, so basically if the complexity is on the data server side of the client, or the caller, or the...
Yeah, but also the sequence, right? So the important thing is like, why did, for example, HTTP 2 came about is because in HTTP 1, on 1.1, you can do things one thing at a time, right? And then we saw the performance was not good, things were slow, blah, blah, blah. And then they invented the ability to multiplex actions in one and the same transport. And GNMI and gRPC did the same. So that's the difference.
Is not 100% match of concepts, but okay.
If you to look at GNMI, it's the same. In GNMI, it's 100% exactly what we have. We have delete, update, replace, all in the same GNMI set. And it's the same here. For me, when I looked, so I took a step back basically to say, okay, let's look at this. I didn't come up with my proposal out of the blue but I basically said, okay, what has happened in the industry in the same concept. And if you look to GNMI, there you see clearly they didn't have a separate set, delete, update, replace RPCs. They put a GNMI set, and in there you have updates, deletes, and replaces. And that basically convinced me that what I'm proposing is actually better. That's what has been my motivation. And you always have to trade off different implementations, and I am a big fan of doing one thing and one thing well, but I think here's the wrong choice.
And Marcus, you against it because you think it's just adding complexity, or it's too complex to...
It's too complex, it's not obvious, right? So you have this transaction intent. So how do you like revert paths, and you have all these set off and non-reverted, blah blah blah, right? So it's also not a clear
But see, Marcus,
API.
nothing in this
So on.
API prevents you. You can do it first or you can do it last. And for me, if you do it that way, it's still simple. It's not complex. It's because you have the flexibility to do it. You can implement it very complex, but you could, for example, say, okay, I get all these things. I execute clear deviation as the last step. Nothing prevents you from doing that. And then it's still as simple as it is if you get it, you get multiple things at the same time. So my view is your argument on complexity doesn't hold in my view, because your implementation can still be simple.
I'm talking about the API fields and the combination of it, and like as a developer looking at it, and or an API user, consumer looking at it.
Yes, but we are talking implementation, right? There is an implementation that adds the complexity, not the API. The API is an API. It's your implementation that sits behind. In my view, can be as simple as if you separate that. And I think that matters. That's what matters.
Yeah. I have nothing more to add.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think I can take a decision here.
Okay. Gurley, you have a view? Is Alex back next week? Or not yet?
Yes, let me quickly check in the calendar. I think he's back on.
But he was off like 3 weeks or something.
Oh yeah, 3 weeks. Oh yeah, actually he's back on the 10th of March.
Yeah, so we need to make a decision, I think.
Okay, again, now unmuted, fellas.
Yeah, no, actually, I don't have a view, sorry. I don't know the architecture that well, and I don't know the technical details that well. I agree with Wim that, like, usually do one thing and one thing well works, but if you say that it's not the right choice here, I trust you.
Okay, let's I don't want to read it, but I think let's proceed with what we have on the table, and then we can always rework it, by the way, if we need to. But I thought it through quite a bit, by the way, but and of course I have a bias.
Is there a way,
Actually,
is there a way for some kind of a fast prototyping of this, just to see?
Yeah, I mean,
in the end, it'll both work, right? I mean, let's be clear about that.
Yeah, they both will work. But yeah.
All right, so let's go on with what is proposed.
And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I cry a bit tonight, and then we'll all be happy tomorrow again.
No worries. All right. Is there anything else? There was this other item, Gurley, contributor order algorithm. Did you look into that?
I did ask Copilot, and it said that it's random. So we don't.
That's what I also thought. That's also my understanding. It just picks from the name, and the order of the list doesn't really matter. But that's not what we see so far.
Yes, it said that, like, it depends on like the interaction frequency, who has what role in the project, but in general, it said that you really cannot influence the order. So maybe that's a GitHub feature idea.
But maybe this is it because I mean let's look at him, right? But right now what we see is that the people assigned, but also I think we don't see that randomness in the assignment at the moment, I think, or I haven't seen that either. Marcus has the same concern, but maybe it's also because the new people haven't been assigned that long. That's maybe for that reason or something like that. I don't know. But let's see.
Did you recognize any change? So now I did change from like direct assignment in the code owners.md to a group assignment in code owners and assigning people to the group. So that happened somewhere last week.
Yes.
Was there any change in behavior?
I have only done one API, one PR, I think. I don't know why this thing is so freaking slow. I did one PR. I haven't looked at the review owners yet.
Yeah, now it's only code owners that show up, so it doesn't seem to resolve the group. If you take a look at data server pull request 401, you'll see that.
So you don't have individual names anymore. That's not good. That we need to fix. Okay, maybe if you can have a look at that, Kirby, that would be great.
The other thing we could at least piece or introduce here is the automatic reversion of unhandled. Do we want to?
Yes, the problem is I need to jump on a call in a bit.
Oh, we're 2 minutes before the end. Yeah, okay. No, I thought we had more time. No, then let's cover that next week, I guess.
Yeah, okay, I'll add it to the item next week. Yeah.
Right, that's at least something to have a quickly introduce and then.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Have a nice day.
Cheers.
Next week. Cheers. Bye.
Yes.